Okay, great. So we have, I just want to do this quick lecture to help you guys do your homework tonight, because nobody's in here, so I'm going to try to look over there, hopefully instead of down here on the computer. But anyways, we're going to be talking about factoring quadratic trinomials when there is an A. Sorry, I'm closing the door. When there's an A in the trinomial. Up to this point, I've only given you x squared plus something x plus something. I've never given you a number in front of the x squared when we've been dealing with trinomials. And so what we have to do is we have to look at that for a second. Depending on the type of trinomial, there are different ways you have to do it. But the very first thing you should always try, and it will always work on the homework tonight, the very first thing you should always try is to try to factor out the greatest common factor first. Greatest common factor first. That's the very first thing you do. So for an example, if I gave you, I'll actually do number 1 on the homework, just so that you can have one to use it as a guide. If I had 3x squared plus 12x plus 9, and I asked you to factor that, then what I want you to do is look at that A. And that A should not be there. That A should be a number 1. It's a number 3. It's got to be a number 1 before I can do my parenthesis, 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 and then factor it, right? Factoring it using the reverse of FOIL. So I want to get rid of that 3. So the easiest way is to factor it out. If 3 does in fact go into all these numbers. 3 goes into 3, obviously. Does 3 go into 12? Yes. Does 3 go into 9? Yes. Ah, perfect. But when you factor out a greatest common factor, you actually write what you're factoring out, and then you put a parenthesis next to it. And then you figure out what's the trinomial when you divide everything by 3. Well, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so 1x squared, or just x squared, plus 12 divided by 3 is 4x, plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, so that's our first step, right? And so that's step 1. I'll put 1 over here, and then I'll say step 1. Okay, now step 2 is to notice that this is a quadratic trinomial that is very simple to factor. So you still have to keep this 3 here. You just ignore it, but you keep it there. And I'm going to set my 2 sets of parentheses. To get x squared, my first times my first gives me my x squared. That would be x times x. My last numbers times my last number gives me the last number here. And the only possible option of 3 is 1 times 3. So 1 plus 3 is positive 4. So we're going to do plus 1 plus 3. And I'm done. I can just double check. X times x is x squared. My outside plus my inside. 3x plus 1x equals 4x. My 1 times 3 equals 3. I'm right. There we go. That's the answer. All right, so that's what I'm looking for. The first thing you do is, if you notice there's a number in front of the x squared, you factor out that number by putting it here, put a parenthesis, and then dividing each of these numbers by that factor. And then you notice you have a quadratic trinomial, and you'll take it one step further to factoring the quadratic trinomial. All right. Now, so the whole first page is doing those. The second page, there are 4 examples, or 4 problems, where you do the same thing, only it's an equation. Notice this is not an equation. There's no equal sign. All you have to do is factor. But on the others, there's an equation, and it's set equal to 0. So when it's set equal to 0, that's like saying find the zeros. Find make sure this computer's still on. Seems to be. Find x when y is 0. If it's equal to 0, then y has already been made 0. All right? So I'll give you an example on the back page, number 11, I guess. I'll do number 11. So I'll keep my step 1 and step 2 because that probably would be useful. So now we're going to say find the zeros. So we'll say then find zeros. Is this on the find zeros? Okay, so here we go. So this is the problem now. We've got 2x squared plus 12x plus 10 equals 0. So I have the same thing I had before, basically. I mean, different problem, but except I put equals 0. That would normally be equals y, but I'm making y 0. That means I'm finding my zeros, finding where x crosses the x-axis on this parabola. So my first step is to factor out the greatest common factor because the number in front of the x squared is not a 1, a hidden one. It's got to be a hidden 1 before I can do my parenthesis, 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 parenthesis. So I ask myself, does 2 go into 2? Yes. Does 2 go into 12? Yes. Does 2 go into 10? Yes. So I can factor it out. So I'm going to factor it out. So we have x squared, so 2 divided by 2 is 1, or 1x squared, or just x squared, plus 12 divided by 2 is 6x, plus 10 divided by 2 is 5, equals 0. That equals 0 is very important. Now, because it equals 0, I can get rid of this 2. Now that I've factored it out. This is really cool, I think. But if you just divide both sides by 2, that's your next step. That's your step 2, right? And that gives you suddenly x squared. You don't even need the parentheses anymore. It just gives you x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. Now, the reason why is 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times this is just this, so I can just write that. 0 divided by 2. How many times does 2 go into 0? 0 times. So we just got rid of that 2 easily because it equals 0. If it was any other number, we wouldn't get rid of the 2. But because it equals 0, we got rid of that 2. All right, so now you have what you're used to, right? So here now we're going to do our step 3. We're going to factor it. So our step 2 was actually dividing this by the 2. Our step 3 is to factor it. So I'm going to go boom, 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 equals 0. X times x equals x squared. Okay, factors of 5 that add to 6. 5 times 1, 5 plus 1 is 6, that's it. And it's positive, positive, they're all positive, they've got to be positive. So positive 5, positive 1. And then my final step, step 4, is actually to find the zeros. If a times b equals 0, if this times this equals 0, either this binomial has to equal 0, and the only way x would have to be negative 5 equals 0. But if you don't know that, you go x plus 5 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. And then you subtract 5 from both sides. You got x is equal to negative 5, or subtract 1 from both sides, x is equal to negative 1. And that is your answer. Those are your zeros. That is where, you don't have to do this graph thing, but negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, I know the parabola goes through those 2 points, so it's going to look something like that. Okay? That's what that told me. That's what I found. That on my x-axis, this is my y-axis, this is my x-axis, these 2 points are where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Okay, that is it. You should be able to do your homework fine. This was, by the way, problem 11 that I did. Sorry, I didn't say that on the homework, on the back side, I believe. Yes. So that should solve it. So that should make it a lot easier for you to do the homework.